this is Homeschool Unrefined. We created this podcast to change the conversation about homeschool. This is a place where we encourage each other to do less, be ourselves, embrace natural learning, and keep homeschool simple, real, and fun. We are longtime friends, Minnesotans, and practiced homeschool parents with our master's degree in education. We are an inclusive and non-sectarian podcast and community. We believe Black Lives Matter and affirm LGBTQ plus families. We hope this is a place where we can all learn and grow together.
This is episode 165, Getting on the Same Page as Your Partner. We are going to get to that in just a minute. First, Maren, hello.
Hi.
I think I'm up this week for an aha moment.
Yes. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I can't wait.
Okay. My aha moment is, this is interesting because I have not felt this before, but now that all of my kids are in school and they are teens, I think it's the combination of both. My youngest is almost a teen. I am feeling like, you know how parents say, like, if you can get 5 minutes of quality time in a day per kid,
Yes.
you're doing well?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel that.
You feel that strong.
Yeah, because I have never felt that before as a homeschool parent. I think
Same.
I don't know. You've probably never felt that either. Like, we're together all the time.
Yeah. I can't imagine.
And-
Only 5 minutes.
I know.
Doesn't seem like enough. But
And often, like, also kind of you're feeling bad about how much, even as a homeschool parent, sometimes you feel bad about how much you're not doing or spending with
totally.
them.
And you know, like, even in the evenings after spending all day together, sometimes I'm like, ooh, I gotta spend more time with this one kid or what, or everyone. We all have to do something together. I mean, I have absolutely felt that. And I think that's valid too, but I think I know where you're coming from now that your kids are getting older, but I'd love to hear more.
Well, I feel like they're gone a lot.
Right.
Not only are they at school now, but then also they're like social. And not always wanting to hang out with me. But I do think that connection is so important, and I miss it. I miss it so much because I feel like my life just changed. We went from a pandemic, homeschooling in a pandemic.
Yeah. So it was like homeschool, like times 100.
We were together so much.
Oh, yeah.
And then now we're not. Like, life just completely changed, and I'm just like, I've got to make these connections. This is so important. I can't let a day go by without really connecting with each kid.
Right.
And it's a challenge. So,
well, and I think, yes, definitely. I feel like when that happens, as my kids are getting older too, I feel the same way. My oldest is 14, so slightly younger. Your oldest is 16. So slightly younger. And but I do see that starting to happen with my 14-year-old. I don't even feel like, I don't know. I don't feel like she just really needs me to spend that much time with her anymore. And that's fine. Yeah. It's kind of hard for me. But but I also am trusting, the years that we have spent, so much time together. And I just feel like it was such a good foundation. And so I feel really secure in like letting that go more, now.
That's great.
Yeah. Do you feel the same way?
I don't know.
Oh.
I was just thinking.
Okay.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, yes, I feel that way. And then also, I'm a little hesitant to let it go. But I think that's all. It's just me too.
Oh, yeah.
It's really hard.
It is hard. It is hard.
And I know that, like, teens they still need you, even if they act like they don't. So
it is true.
I don't want that to happen.
Yep.
So anyway.
Totally.
Okay, our sponsor this week we are really excited about is Nalini Kids, and they are the creators of Word Workouts. We talked to you a couple weeks ago about Word Workouts, and I'm curious if anybody got a chance to go visit their website and check them out, because they have these awesome 10-minute videos that about 10 minutes, some are different lengths, but let's just say 10 minutes, where you explore an emotion such as like imagine or anger or curiosity or something, and you do a movement related to that feeling while somebody kind of guides you through what that feels like in your body.
Yeah. I love this because it puts some physical movement in with could be a very strong emotion, like say anger. And I just think that I don't know if it like closes the stress cycle a little bit, or it makes connections in your brain when you're moving. I mean, we know that, right? When you're moving, brain cell, the neurons in your brain actually connect so much better. So I love how it's very science-based in that way. And it's also just really enjoyable and short. Like these will capture your kid's attention, and they're just so interactive that they won't, they're never going to zone out.
Yeah, I mean, I could envision using these for like a movement break, or like if your kid is having a strong emotion and you need a way to work through that, or even as a basis for what you do that day.
We've always sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've always talked about how mental health is so important.
So important.
And this really supports mental health. And something else is self-awareness. And I think if there's one thing we can teach our kids while we're homeschooling, it is self-awareness, and to be aware of our own emotions and how to handle them. So this is like the education so many of us need right now.
Right. So this is for kids ages 4 to 18, and you can find out about them. Oh, I forgot to say, they're free, everyone. They're free. This is a nonprofit.
Wow.
So it's just awesome what they're doing. Go to wordworkouts.org to access those lessons.
Yes. Thank you, Nalini Kids. One quick announcement. We are going to be hosting a coffee hour this week, actually tomorrow, for all of you listening on Monday. It is Tuesday, October 19th, 12 o'clock Central. And we do this for our Patreon community. We always have question and processing episodes in Patreon.
Yep.
Usually twice a month. This one is going to be a live Q&P, question and process.
Yep.
So we're going to answer one question, and then we're going to have a very interactive question and process time together.
Right. So you can come with questions if you're a patron. And we are going to make this more interactive than we have in the past. So we are excited to see you there. If you are not a patron and you would like to join so that you can come, go to patreon.com/homeschoolunrefined.
All right. Let's move on to our main topic, which is getting on the same page as your partner.
Yes.
This can be, I think this has been a highly asked question for us throughout the years. I think it's a complicated topic. It's not always easy to just quickly answer this one. And so we thought we'd make it a whole episode.
Yeah. And, we thought this was appropriate right now because, I guess I don't know of many partnerships where everybody's on the same page of things with their kids.
Yes.
I mean, you're always usually disagreeing about something, sometimes more severely than others. Sometimes you're on the same page, sometimes you're really not. And I know, especially for homeschooling, I feel like it's a thing where like usually one partner is on board and then the other partner has to kind of get used to the idea.
Yes.
Or comes to the decision afterwards.
So true.
And so we wanted to talk about that, but also like for any schooling decisions, like if they're going to go to school, where they're going to go to school, or this can really apply to really any kind of decision that you're making as a team.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So we thought we would just start with our own stories, because I think we both agree personal stories, I think, can just speak volumes to this. We have different stories, definitely.
Yep.
And I think they'll both be good, very helpful, like in their own ways. And then we're going to end with 3 tips to help you get on the same page as your partner.
Yeah.
All right. So Angela, do you want to start first?
I'll get started. Okay. So I've told bits of this in other episodes. So, some of this, if you've been around for a while, might be familiar, but I don't think I've ever really gone through the whole thing. And obviously my kids are older now and we've made different schooling decisions now. And so the story has evolved. So Jeremy, he's my husband. We have 3 kids. We were not ever planning on homeschooling. I was a teacher. I believe in public schools. It just never crossed my mind. And then my oldest went to kindergarten, and I had to work hard to find a halftime kindergarten for her because I knew that full-time kindergarten was going to be a lot. Yeah. And at that time, so she's 16 now, so it's been like 10, 11 years. That was just on the cusp of them like kind of switching over from halftime kindergarten, even being an option, to like full-time kindergarten. Right. And so we were able to find a school that still did halftime kindergarten. And I felt like, well, that was good. It was still like too much for her.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. And when that year was done, I just honestly like couldn't imagine sending her to first grade. And not because like academically she was fine. It was just more like she was so tired. Mm-hmm. She was so exhausted. Mm-hmm. And I really felt like I wanted to preserve her playtime.
Yep.
That was at the same time I had read Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne. And preserving this like, childhood was, at the top of my mind. And I saw that when she went to school, she would come home, be so tired. And, we were kind of getting the tired version of her.
Exactly.
When, if she's just allowed to play and have fun, she was more at her best.
For
like
sure.
She was regulated.
Yes.
Okay. So, I looked into homeschooling briefly because, honestly, Maren, you were looking into it before I was. But honestly, and I've told you this before, I thought you were kind of nuts. I remember when you told me you were considering homeschooling, I remember like my stomach dropping. And of course I like didn't say that to you. I was just like, oh, yeah, great. Wow. But I was like, that is so out there. Like, I just thought it was like this out there, like radical thing. Right.
Yeah. Well, you know what? To be fair, I kind of thought that too. I think I said that to you and nobody else.
Sorry.
Because I was like, I know this is so wild.
My gosh.
It felt so wild at the time. And I don't know if I thought it was realistic or anything. I think I just said it. Like,
yeah.
That's an option, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, okay. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, you said it like you were really thinking about it. You're like, yeah, I'm considering it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Wow.
Anyway,
so I'm just gonna say I'm pretty sure I thought it was weird too. I did.
Yeah. Okay.
I really did.
Yeah, I know that's true. Yeah. I think you like
had to
just
come
evolved a little quicker than I did.
Maybe.
So in my search to try and figure out what to do with my oldest for first grade, I was like, well, I mean, I guess we could homeschool, but I really hate that option. I wish there was something like more part-time. I mean, can't she still do halftime kindergarten?
Yeah.
Can she do halftime first grade?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. Right. And we had lived in Arizona when she was doing kindergarten, and we were moving to Minnesota, back to Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And Maren, you were like, well, there's this one school, that does like part-time homeschool. Mm-hmm. And so I looked into it. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I could do that, where it was, she would go to school 3 days a week and then she'd be homeschooled too. And that was kind of like my internal compromise. I was like, right. I didn't call myself a homeschooler. Like, I didn't tell anybody I was like, yeah, she's going to this school,
Sure.
And then where Jeremy comes in is he saw the same things I saw with our daughter. And he was, like, we were on the same page, but also like, education and stuff, that's not his thing, right?
Yeah.
This isn't his wheelhouse. And homeschooling to him was like too far-fetched. Sure. It was just too far-fetched. He had known some homeschoolers growing up, and he just, I think it was too new then, because that was like 35 years ago or whatever. And so he didn't really have like a good picture of it.
Right.
And I think, honestly, and I think you'd probably agree, I was just like making his life difficult by even questioning this. Really.
Yeah.
Because like, why can't we just like do what everyone else does?
Well,
I know it kind of sucks for her. And I know this isn't probably the best for her, but that's what people do. And she'll get used to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think this... I just want to interject. I think a lot of our personalities come into play here too, because he's an Enneagram 1, correct?
Yes.
And so in his mind, the right thing to do was go to school.
Just go to school.
You do the
and
right
let
thing.
them adapt.
Let them adapt.
Let them adapt
right.
to the way the world is.
Right.
And I was like, he's like, she's going to have to sometime. She's going to have to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, but does she? And,
or
you know,
does she right now?
Does she right now? Yeah. And I've always been a questioner, so I don't know why I didn't question homeschool, but the same thing happened to us when I decided I wanted a home birth over my third child. Yeah. And I think he was just like, why do you got to do this? Like,
why do you have to be so weird?
Why? Can't you just do what everyone else does, please? And
I think like that's great. I think it's so great, but I did not mean that when I said that. Why do you have to be so weird?
No. But yeah, no, he does think that. He does. and it just like, I mean, like having a home birth like made his life harder. He had to be like really involved. And he was afraid, you know, and I started out the same way, like, well, I would never do a home birth, but I'm just going to read up on it a little bit. And then I'd be like, well, I still think it's weird, but actually there's some good things about it. And then I would like slowly change my position. Right. And he was like shaking his head, you know? Mm-hmm. So anyway, it was the same with homeschooling, but we decided to do this part-time school and he was okay with it because we toured the school. He loved it. You know, he thought it was great. And he was like, yeah, okay, I can see it. It's still school. Yeah. So we're still okay. Yeah. But this was my gateway really to homeschooling. Mm-hmm. This afforded our family lots of flexibility. We went south in the winter for a month every year. Awesome. And it was amazing. He, you know, he works in Arizona too, so we were able to go there. We were able to visit friends who we knew there. I mean, it was just like this wonderful experience for our family. And that went on for a couple of years, and he was getting used to this idea. You know, we started calling ourselves homeschoolers. You know, and then like the other thing I did was I had him read Free to Learn by Peter Gray. Mm-hmm. Looking back, now I know he has dyslexia and that's why he hates to read. But so I cannot believe he actually read this book. It doesn't come in audiobook.
I know.
He actually read it with his eyes.
It's really hard for me to read that book too. Yes. Because I think I have dyslexia and I'm like, could the book please be on audio?
I know.
I need that.
Yeah. So I'm looking back like super impressed that he actually read this book, but he did it for me.
I know.
And it changed his position too. Mm-hmm. He was just like, wow, yeah, you're right. You're right. Kids need to learn in a different way. Mm-hmm. They need to learn naturally. This kind of tipped the scales for us, I would say.
Yes.
And he really started to get behind homeschooling. So, you know, it took a while for him, but he started to see over the years, like the benefits of this for our kids. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he was very much behind it after that. He was a big supporter.
Right.
And then so after a couple of years of doing this part-time homeschool school, I just decided like, I can do this. I got this confidence. Mm-hmm. I was like, I can do this. We don't need to like do what the school wants us to do. Let's just do what we want to do and have like more flexibility and more time for rest and more time for our own interests and stuff like that. So we then switched to homeschooling full time, and Jeremy was all for that. We traveled more. We had lots of flexibility. Kids were less stressed. I was less stressed. I was less yelly.
Yes.
And I felt great about it. I noticed.
Yep.
I noticed I was kind of a yeller. Well, I don't want to say that. I just sometimes got frustrated. Mm-hmm. And once I brought them all home full time, that all went away. Yeah. And I know that's not the case. I mean, I still get frustrated sometimes. I don't want to say it all went away.
Right.
But it decreased a lot because we didn't have to like all be out the door at 8:00 with like each of our 10 items.
And when they're young, you were doing that when they were quite young. So so much of that is on you at that age.
Yeah, all
to
of
get the lunches and the water bottles and the snacks and the right shoes
the snow pants and the boots and the hat.
Make sure you get everything for recess. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Totally. So that went well for a while until our oldest expressed a desire to go to high school. And then
fast forward. So that was
fast forward to 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Was that 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. 2 years ago when she decided she wanted to go to high school. And actually he was like, yes, it's time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but is it? Mm-hmm. Like, let's explore this from all options, from all angles or whatever. And in the end, it's what she really wanted. And even though I grieved like her being gone, I was like, yep, I get it. Let's do this. But then this year, our kids, we decided, and I talked about this 2 episodes ago, that all of our kids would go to traditional school this year. And our toughest challenge not toughest challenge of our marriage, toughest decision we've had to make in our marriage, I would say, happened regarding this. And it was where 2 of our kids would go to school. So we spent, I'm going to say, from like May to end of August talking about where our kids were going to go to school. And it was stressful, and it was fraught, and it was not fun. And it was emotional, because our kids were dealing with some mental health struggles too. And we had so many long conversations. Yeah. And what ended up happening, and you know the story, Maren, because I like updated you the whole way. Yeah. So you're like, yes, I remember. It was stressful. Yeah. And Jeremy, I talked to him and he's like, yeah, you can share all that. I was like, do you care if I share like what happened? Because I think people probably need to know, and he's like, yep, you can share. So what happened is,
I love that about Jeremy.
Yeah, he's like so open,
willing to share things. I love that.
Yeah, he's just like, yeah, tell him. He's a super open book.
Yep.
But 2 of our kids, he wanted to go to one school, and I was on board with that school. Let's just call it School A. I was on board with School A, them going to School A for the first part of the summer. Yeah. And kids wanted to go to School B. And then as basically August hit, I started changing my mind, and I thought they should go to School B. Yeah. And he was super stuck on School A. He thought for all these reasons it was the best choice. And the more and more I talked with the kids, did my own research, talked it through with friends, talked it through with my therapist.
Yeah.
I was just really set on School B being the right choice. And so
and a lot of that was not necessarily because of what you saw, but what your kids were sharing with you about their own desires and needs, right?
Yeah, and I really wanted to honor that. Yep. I really thought that was important. And Jeremy was more like, they'll get over it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And, but I started to see all the benefits of, let's just call it School B.
Yeah.
So, our disagreements on this were very respectful, but very contentious.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't yell or anything. We were super nice and respectful to each other, but neither of us would budge. And we looked at this from all angles. Like, how could we compromise? Or could we try this one for a little bit? Or, all the things we're going to suggest in our 3 tips. Yeah. Next.
You broke all those rules?
Well, they didn't really work.
No, they didn't work.
They didn't work that well. This was...
We're not really selling the 3 tips, but it's okay. Most of the time,
3 tips usually work. The 3 tips usually work for me. But in this case, they did not. And I think it's because he felt so strongly and I felt so strongly. And I knew one of us was just going to have to give. And it just was so hard. And so in the end, I just said, okay, well, one thing I want to say first is usually in our relationship, and I don't know if this works for you and Sean too, but like whoever feels the strongest about something, we usually go with that person because they have this strong feeling, right? So like, I feel really strongly that, our kids needed to be in booster seats until like the correct weight and height, right? So we did that. Jeremy would not have cared as much, right? Or like he feels really strongly that our kids need to get their gun safety training.
Right.
So even though that makes me a little nervous, I'm like, okay, he feels so strongly about it.
Right.
So usually that's how we work. And in this case, like both of us felt so strongly and there wasn't any budging. And in the end, I just said, I'm so sorry to do this to you, but I think you need to concede.
Yeah.
And I think it's because the kids wanted what I wanted. And so it sort of felt like 2 against 1.
Yeah.
And he was really upset. And I don't know if he's still over it. I mean, it's taking a while.
Yep.
And I was very like apologetic because that would be awful if that was me. But I was just like, I think you need to concede, and we can always change our mind. We can always make a different decision.
Yes.
Later if needed, but we need to start with this because we have to make a decision. So
it was like getting to that time.
It was getting
you had to make a decision.
Like a couple days before we had to make a decision.
Yeah.
So,
and maybe the anxiety of not knowing was worse than just like not making a decision.
It was awful. Yeah. The dragging out of the making of the decision was awful.
Hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think actually he's in a way better mood about it now. I think he's actually fine about it now. But
yeah. Do you think, was there ever a factor of, like you are the one who's been, mainly homeschooling them this whole time.
Oh yeah.
And you have
I was going to say that.
this is part of my story too. Like, I just think like my fingers on the pulse of how everybody's doing mentally, emotionally, academically. And I really need you to listen to me and hear me on this. This is important.
And that I do try and say that to him, and he does not like that. He thinks that's a reason that is not valid. That bothers me because I'm like, no, it is. I do know what I'm doing. I've been doing this job for many years. I know our kids, like educationally, I'm a teacher, all that.
Right.
But he's always like, yeah, but I'm a parent too, and my voice matters.
Which is
my opinion
so valid
matters
too. And so
and I think sometimes he thinks, because I'm so in it, I don't always see a bigger picture or like, I miss things that he sees from the outside.
And I think that is valid. I think that's true. So I don't think that it's one or the other 100% of the time either. So that's where it gets messy, and
it does.
This is why it's complicated, and this requires a whole episode at least.
Right.
Whole episode plus.
Yeah. So that's our story.
And so that's where you're at.
Maren, do you want to share your story?
Sure. Yes. So same beginning, almost. Well, not exactly. I shouldn't say that. I do remember when I was even when I was a teacher, and I was dating Sean, I remember telling him, when I have kids, I'm probably going to want to stay home with them because I just could already see the value in having a really strong connection with kids when they're younger. I actually don't believe that that's the only way to do it now. I mean, and maybe I didn't back then, but I just felt really strongly that it was super important for me to be home with my young kids whenever that happened. And he was like, oh, wow. Like that was not on his radar at all because his mom works all the time, has been very busy, like a business owner, and is very ambitious. And so like, it was just so different than what he ever grew up, his experience. Seeing modeled. And he just didn't have that on his radar at all. But he also like really valued my opinion in that area because I, was a teacher. I was getting my master's at the time. And to him, he was like, okay, well, you are the expert in this area, so I'm going to defer to you, or whatever. So, and like he's a questioner like you, and questioners definitely like really latch on to experts. So if somebody, reaches that, if they've, reached that level of trust with a questioner, then they're like, I put my trust in you.
And he has.
He did from the beginning. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, which was great. And so we have been on the same page for a long time about parenting, education, and all that stuff. Okay, so cut to us after we had kids. We lived in a neighborhood where we had neighbors who were homeschooling, and we kind of got to know them, and they were like this great family, and they're just like so wonderful. And we were like, oh, like that's a thing. Homeschooling is a thing. And like these great people homeschool and their kids are awesome, and so we were like, oh, that's like, that could be a choice. And I was feeling the same way kind of as you, but before my kids were going to school. I know you were saying about your oldest going to kindergarten. Our kids weren't even that old yet. And I remember maybe when my oldest was, I don't know. Well, she did go to preschool. So maybe it was her preschool year when I was like, I don't feel like I want to send her to all-day kindergarten. And that was the only option I knew of at the time. And I think probably the only thing I could have done. So I just did not feel ready for that at all. Meanwhile, I even back then, I think I started noticing that my kids might be a little differently wired, like I think they learn differently than maybe a traditional learner, even at a young age. I kind of just noticed some things, and I knew myself. I had I had done my own research on ADHD for myself and dyslexia. And as a teacher, you'd think I would know more about that, but teachers do not get educated on that kind of stuff until they have a child who in their class who has those things. Then you educate yourself really quickly. But I was educating myself on those things, and I just knew I started seeing signs. I was like, I think this is a thing for our family. And so we decided we're not going to send our kids to public school right away, at least. We'll just take it year by year. By that time, you were sending your kids to the part-time homeschool thing. And so, and you were, I think I shared it with you first, but then you actually did it, and you were like giving me reports on like, this is a good thing. It's like a really good. So that felt really good to me too, that I knew you were sending your kids there and it was a good environment. Right. It was, very child focused and low pressure, I think was the thing. And we could have 2 days at home.
And it was part-time. Yeah.
Yes. And so that's what we did. And it was great. And I felt this, but I also felt the same way as my kids got older in going to this part-time homeschool co-op thing. It was very apparent to me too that the learning differences were getting more prominent. And so we had our oldest child tested in 3rd grade. And, after that, I was like, I just feel like it's time to just go home, be home, full-time homeschooling. And Sean honestly felt the same way. And so, and here's the thing, Sean is an entrepreneur. He's a business owner. He is an outside of the box thinker. He's, he highly values people who think independently and who, they can problem solve and come up with ideas and stuff like that. So he really, after, based on, my input and then his experience as an entrepreneur, he was like, he sees homeschool as like the best choice for kids to learn how to think for themselves, to find out what they're passionate about or what they just like to do, to like go down those rabbit holes of what they're interested in doing. He really sees that as such a key to learning, especially when they're younger.
That's great.
Figuring out how to reach your own goals and not being told what your goals are. He loves that. And, we get to set our own schedule. And especially as an entrepreneur and a business owner, he could do that for his own job. So like, we were able to also go on trips or even just day outings. And so the freedom felt so good. And I think it was just so valuable. There's, nothing I would do to change that experience at all. And I think Sean would absolutely say the same thing. Then we got to, the other thing is Sean and I decided when we first got married, we've always talked about traveling for extended periods of time. And we always like dreamed of doing that with our kids, dreamed of it. And we just kind of thought, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to do this. I don't know. But this opportunity happened where we were ready to sell our house. And then we weren't ready to buy a new house. We just weren't finding a house that we really liked. And we were feeling itchy about, do we want to stay here? Do we want to stay in the city? We kind of wanted to go explore and make an informed decision about where we even wanted to live next. And because our kids were homeschooling, we had made that choice together. And the other thing is we felt very strongly about delaying our commitment to sports and other activities. Because that's another thing. So Sean grew up in a very competitive sports environment, with soccer and hockey. And he feels so strongly that was, the later the better is basically what he's saying, with that kind of pressure. And so we hadn't really gotten ourselves involved in like a ton of commitments yet. And so, we decided to travel for a year, and it was just the most valuable experience we've had. And we couldn't have done that had we, not decided to homeschool.
For sure.
And really both of us really had to trust that the learning was going to happen on that year-long trip, because we weren't doing a ton of traditional academics, but we knew their minds were working the whole year. And so we were both very convinced of that. So it was awesome. It was just an awesome year. And so I'm so glad we did that. One thing that is a little different between Sean and I is that once he makes a decision, he likes to just stick with it and just do it, And so we do have many conversations about nuance and how we as parents, once we have even just a small conversation with a child, it can change the way we do things, And so I think for sure, and I think this is very similar to the way, you were saying, like, it's important for me to be able to give my input because I know intimately like where my kids are at. Mentally and emotionally and academically and everything. And I feel the same way, where I do feel like it's important for me to communicate that with Sean because of his hard and fast decision making. Like he really likes to do that, but he really, he has learned to like slow down and not make very, flat decisions. Like we're just doing this based on the decision that I make, that what I know right now, we're going to make this decision for the long term or whatever, because things can change quickly based on what our kids need at that moment.
For sure. Yes.
So that has been definitely like an ongoing conversation.
That's
for
great.
sure that we've had along the way. Okay. So, cut to this year, after a year of traveling where we lost connections with friends and community here, in Minnesota while we were traveling. And then, a year of COVID, we both really noticed, a decline in our children's mental health, mostly, it was just really, really tough for all of them. And so our kids, we were also listening to our kids, and some of our kids were saying they wanted to go to school. And so we both strongly agreed with that. We did. We weren't just like, it's interesting because it wasn't like, I'm going to really miss homeschooling. Maybe you should just stay one more year. I was like, no, I agree. I think it's the right thing. Neither of us think that public school is the ideal option, but at this point, for some of our kids, neither is homeschooling. It's just because we missed out on so much, and we need to almost like a strong dose of it right now. The community, the people. And so that's where we're both at. And, I do have to say, when we were deciding on schools, I don't think I had any super strong decisions, although I did feel like my priority was to make our life as simple as possible still. I didn't want to complicate our lives with all the schedules and all the driving and stuff. I wanted it. My priority was actually like, let's find the closest schools and we all go to the closest schools. If that's where, if you guys want to go to school. Sean was actually the one who was like, listen, we have to find the schools that are best for our kids. And if it means driving farther, I'll do it. I will do it. I'll do it because I know that's not what you want to be doing. And I understand that. Yeah. And, and he was kind of like, you've invested so much time in our kids for homeschooling that I'm going to invest in this for now. So, he really opened my mind up to different schools. And I'm so glad he did because we found the right schools, I think, for our kids so far.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we wouldn't have.
Yeah. Sean seems like a huge, cheerleader and supporter of whatever you're doing, which I think is great and unique.
Yes. Yeah, you're right.
It's unique.
We did have, he was on, I believe he was on a Patreon episode a couple of years ago. It was before we traveled.
He was on a main episode, wasn't he?
Was he?
Were both of our husbands on a main episode? I think he was.
Oh, wow.
If you go way back, you can find.
Okay.
No, Sean was on a main episode. Jeremy was in Patreon.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I loved that interview. Maybe we should put a link. Notes to that.
Let's put a link in the show notes.
Yeah. Let's do that. And anyway, so I think you're right. He's probably unique, but I think he also brings a good perspective. If you have a spouse who might not be on board with homeschooling, that might be a good episode to go find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Because he has strong feelings about it.
He does.
About homeschooling. That it's good. Yeah. That it's very, very good.
That it's good. Yeah.
And it's really, So anyway, I also agree that the strongest feeling wins often in our family. Although I am working on that because I think Sean often has the strongest feeling. And so I am working on, using my voice because for homeschooling, my voice often wins because it is the strongest feeling. Yeah, for homeschooling. But I do think also, sometimes I think in a partnership, one person just has stronger feelings than the other. And it's important to listen to both. I still think it's really important to listen to both feelings. Because otherwise, the person without the strongest feeling is never going to feel hurt.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, that's going to come with our 3 tips.
Yes.
Which I'm excited to get to.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thanks for sharing your story. Yes. So we came up with 3 tips, and I want to take back what I said that the 3 tips didn't work because actually the last tip worked.
Oh, good.
So,
okay.
I forgot about her.
That's awesome.
Okay. So the first tip we have is really understand where the other person is coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this involves really listening to the story behind their viewpoint, their fears. You need to validate where they're coming from, validate their fears. And that, your partner should be doing that for you too. Mm-hmm. Because I think this is the key is when we really understand each other, we have a lot more empathy and, the decisions, the decisions become a bit easier or softer.
Yes.
Because we get where our partner is coming from.
I like that. Yes, softer for sure. Yep. And just to trust, we all have good intentions here. We all want what's best for our kids. We have our own history.
Yeah.
We have our own memories. And a lot of those memories inform
for sure
our decisions. And we just have to understand each other in that way.
Yep.
And sometimes it just needs to, the conversation can just end right there. Each person can share and validate and listen and then let that sink in for a while.
Yeah.
Because the validation just needs to sit there for a while. If you validate and then you move on really quickly, it's hard to feel almost, heard in that at that moment.
Right.
So sometimes just letting that sink in for a while. Listening.
Mm-hmm. I can see that definitely because sometimes Jeremy and I will do I hear you and here's my point.
Yes.
So just doing the I really hear you and that's all we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Yep.
Is can be really valuable because then your only job is to listen.
Yes. Yeah. And if maybe you just set that up ahead of time and say, today, let's just talk about why we think we should do this thing for our kids' education. We each get to talk.
Yeah. That's great. That reminds me actually of my therapist who I have this great therapist, and she was talking me through this summer, and she suggested that. Now that I'm thinking back, she suggested that, though. She was talking about in conversations with our kids, but she said, when you're having a tough decision or conversation, you don't do it all at once. You like start in chunks and you set a timer and you say like, the purpose of today's conversation is to listen to each other's fears and background and history. We're each going to get 10 minutes to talk and then we're going to be done. Yes. And then so people don't get overwhelmed. You're not like hashing this out for hours, but it's just like, let's just get this down. You can take notes. If you get off track, just go, nope, we're staying on track.
Yes.
And then your next conversation is a little bit deeper.
I like your therapist.
Yeah, me too.
So awesome. All right. The next tip is be flexible. Ask yourself, what are you willing to bend on? And you might, this might change over time because at first you might not be willing to bend on anything. And then maybe you've had that first conversation where you heard the person, you really, really heard your partner. And then you kind of get it a little more and you realize, I think I could bend on a few things.
Yeah. And like, once you've heard their story, maybe you realize that their fear is, their deep down fear is, my kid isn't going to make friends, or my kid isn't going to learn math properly, or, I don't know, something like that. Right. And so you can say like, hey, we can try this thing that I want, but as a compromise, we will get a math tutor.
Yes.
We will join these clubs.
Yes.
Or whatever, you can kind of address the fear in a compromise.
Absolutely. We can do the annual testing if you need to. Whatever. I don't know what it is. But also I think, okay, so I know this one is called be flexible, this tip, but also I think it's okay to have a few things maybe that you really want to stand up for.
Yeah.
These are tenets of my, my belief system. And it's so important.
Yeah.
And like you and Jeremy this summer, you both had really strong things. And I think, I don't think it's bad that you both had strong feelings that were different. And I think sometimes it's okay to just, to be there for a while too.
It is. Yeah. And it was good to recognize like, he agreed with me and I agreed with him. It's just that I had a different priority than he did. Right, and I think that's what, it's not like I disagreed with what he was saying. I did. I just thought my thing was more important and vice versa. So.
Yep.
All right. So the last tip is have a plan. How long are you going to commit to it? And when are you going to make a change? This is what we did that has helped. It's like, we are trying this. This is a trial period. If it doesn't work, we can change it. Maybe your plan is we're going to try it for 6 months and reevaluate.
Right.
Or we can try this for a year.
Yep.
Or we're going to meet again in November just to see how this is going. Right. My therapist, again, told me, the other thing she told me was, you are going to live with the word pivot. That is going to be where you're living. It is okay to pivot. These decisions are not the biggest decisions you're ever going to make. That's something you told me too. You were like, Angela, you guys make schooling decisions every single year.
Yeah.
Like, this is just another year of your schooling decisions. Yeah. This is not your biggest ever decision. Like, stop putting that much weight on it, right?
It's not even like a college decision. It's a high school decision. It's okay.
It's 1 year of school.
Yeah.
Starting out. Or, and so, because you can always change your mind. You can always get a few weeks into this, a few months into this, and go, you know what? This was the wrong decision. We're pivoting. Yes. It's fine. Lots of people do that, and it's going to be okay.
Yes. And what I was thinking of when you were talking about that is so important to get your child's input into this, have this plan too. Because it's really easy. And this is another thing that Sean and I have to talk about a lot to get on the same page is it's so nice and clean to put a plan in place without your child's input. You can be like, hey, okay, we're going to try this school next. We're going to do this. We're going to go on this trip even.
Yeah.
Without talking to your children about it.
I know.
And it's so important to include your children in on that. Yes. And it gets a little messier then, because then there's more cooks in the kitchen. There's more people involved, and that gets harder and more complicated, but it is really, it's key. Yeah. It's their lives, really.
It is. It is. Yeah. It's the right thing to do, even though it's hard.
Even though it's the hard thing to do. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. So true. Yep. And that's where, we have to really trust that our kids have everything they need inside of them. And, they often know themselves. They know themselves in a way we never will. Mm. And so we need that piece of information. And we are the adults, and we are, we can guide them, especially as they get older, we can guide them, but they, our job is to teach them how to have their own agency. Yeah. And to stand up for themselves even, and speak up and say, this is what I need. So to feel heard in that situation is very powerful. Right. Very. Yeah. So it's kind of like getting on the same page with your partner, but with all of your children's input at the same time, so. And this is the stuff we're talking about is, takes a lot of emotional energy and a lot of work. Yes. It's really, really, really hard work. And I know you're all doing it. You're all doing this probably yearly, right? I mean, at least that's how it feels to me. That's how it felt to me. It felt like, totally, this topic comes up a lot, and it's hard emotional work. And so, that takes up a lot of your brain space. Yeah. And you're probably really, worn out from thinking of it and talking about it. And so give yourself all the credit for that. Absolutely. And I would say you're probably, I can't ever say that we're doing this better than anyone else. We are just on the microphone processing through it. Oh gosh. We're just talking about it because we want to normalize it too. This is how we all process through things, is for sure together. So here we are. All right. Before we get to our LTWs, we just wanted to tell you that we are hoping this week in Patreon to have at least one of our husbands. Yes. Talking about this decision, right? Yep. And we also have a regular four monthly episodes on Patreon, along with the coffee hour that we just mentioned, some great discussions happening. We would love to have you over there. It's $5 a month. You can join anytime. And the way to do that is to go to patreon.com/homeschoolunrefined. All right. Let's move on to loving this week. Angela, what are you loving this week? Okay. I am actually loving this week Scenes from a Marriage on HBO. Nice. So I saw you perk up when Tanya talked about it last week. I want to talk about it. So last week in Patreon, Tanya, who was our guest on last week's episode, she was talking in Patreon about things that she's loving to watch and read and stuff like that. And she mentioned the Scenes from a Marriage on HBO. And it piqued my interest. It piqued my interest, and I was like, I gotta watch it. It is so good. So it stars Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain. Oh yeah, we know. Right? Don't we all know this from the viral video? Well, I mean, I knew about the viral video, but I didn't know what it was related to. Okay. I didn't. Yeah. Did you know that they had? You must have known about the show. I knew of the show, and I knew they were in it. That's really all. Okay, so this is a limited series on HBO. Each episode is like an hour. And there's 5 episodes. So, it's not a huge commitment, but it basically explores their marriage and all the troubles over like a 5-year period, I think. I think it goes over a 5-year period. Wow.
And it's basically the two of them in every scene. Just the two of them.
Wow.
So it's very like emotional, relatable. Marriage is not easy. So they definitely explore that.
Okay.
They both have their, issues and faults and things. And so this series just explores all of that. And it's the acting is phenomenal. First of all, I did not know Oscar Isaac before this.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know him?
Well, I knew him from Star Wars.
Okay, yeah, I know.
That's it.
Is that a clue that I don't watch Star Wars?
Yeah.
Okay. Both him and Jessica, they're both like hot. So this is not like hard to watch. So it's real easy to watch. Plus it's like emotional and up my alley. It reminded me a little bit of Normal People, which I loved on Hulu. That was like probably my number one show. I don't know, ever. I've watched it 3 times. It reminded me of that because that followed like a young adult relationship. They weren't married.
Okay.
But this is like similar, just the evolution of a relationship. And I just think, I don't know, I feel like we need more of that. It's sort of, what was that movie that came out like a year ago with Scarlett Johansson and
the
tall
other
hot
guy from Star Wars. Yep, I know.
Oh gosh, Adam Driver.
Yeah.
What was that movie that
It's
they were in?
a marriage story, I think it's
A
called.
marriage story.
on
It's
Netflix,
sort of like that. I feel like we need more like conversation about how like marriage is not easy.
True.
And so I love like a real story like that. And I felt like this was very real. It was not my story, but it's a real one. So
Right.
So I encourage everyone to watch it.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah. Maren, what are you loving this week?
Okay, I'm loving something that actually I'm doing for homeschooling, and it's a YouTube channel. It's called Vox. It's a news channel. They have the best short, I would say educational videos, even though they're not really I don't think they're geared towards kids. I mean, they're not made for kids, I wouldn't say.
Okay.
But they are so compelling. These 10 to 20 minutes, let's say, short videos, and very interesting. Like, they pick super interesting topics. They're so well edited and so well, I don't know, directed. It's just like the next stage of educational videos that people are actually going to love to watch.
Okay, do you have an example of one? Not to put you on the spot.
We watched a few about Manhattan, and they talked. One was all about the grid system and how they did their their streets and stuff. And then they went into some history about Central Park and how Central Park used to be this kind of affluent African American neighborhood that basically got plowed down because they wanted to make Central Park. They just displaced like a whole Black community.
Wow, not surprised.
Yes, exactly. And so, I mean, just like the city planning is very interesting. The history, like the pattern of us displacing people who aren't white. It's just, all of that. And they just, I don't know, tied it together so well. And then they have these like little, I don't know if they're playlists or whatever, but they have one called Vox Darkroom, and they take a picture from history and they just talk about that time in history. And like today we watched one. Awesome. We watched one about these Russians, like from 1950. They were camping in this like valley in the middle of winter, and their bodies were found dead, and it was just like this mystery. And
I've heard of that story.
So it hasn't
where they
been,
like ran out of their tents.
Yeah, they ran out of their tents. It was just this whole story. They talked about the whole thing, all the theories about how it could have happened, and just like the visuals. They do the best kind of graphics. It's just the best. I love it.
Yeah.
It's It's my new homeschool highlight. and I like them too.
Yeah,
they do
I
so
can tell.
much. They do.
Yeah.
They also do a lot about environmental education. They do so many climate videos. And my son is especially interested in that just because we did a co-op when he was in a co-op, he did a huge environmental project. And so he's just making so many connections. And
that's great.
Yeah, it's just awesome. We could watch those all day, I think.
And you probably just should if you.
Yeah. No kidding. No kidding.
Sounds perfect.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening and being with us. If you want to find us on social media, you can go to Facebook or Instagram. We're at Homeschool Unrefined there. You can find our show notes like in your podcast app or on our website, which is homeschoolunrefined.com. And we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Homeschool Unrefined is created and produced by Maren and Angela Sizer. Amanda Ginn is our content and marketing strategist. This podcast is listener supported. Join our growing community at patreon.com/homeschoolunrefined.
We donate 10% of all Patreon income and product sales to The Conscious Kid, a Black and Brown-led organization that has been instrumental in our own evolution and in leading the way in both ideological and tangible change with their work in parenting and education through a critical race lens.
No matter how you homeschool, you are exactly who your kids need. You're doing great.